The massive Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador of the Empire stepped forward. His crystalline form caught the artificial starlight streaming through the dome, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled delegates from 47 different species. The air recyclers hummed quietly, mixing atmospheric compositions suitable for all the diverse life forms present. "Honored Council members," began, his voice resonating through universal translators in dozens of languages and communication methods. "I stand before you today to issue a warning that may save countless lives across our galaxy. The species known as humans from the third planet of the Sol system must never be engaged in military conflict." A ripple of confusion spread through the chamber. The delegates from Hive Collective Prime clicked their mandibles in what their species considered laughter. The gaseous beings from the Nebula Confederacy pulsed with colors indicating amusement. Even the normally stoic rock people of Granite Prime shifted their massive forms in what passed for skeptical movements. Council Speaker, a towering figure from the ancient precursor race, leaned forward on the central dais. "Ambassador, with respect to your empire's military prowess, we find it difficult to understand this warning. Our preliminary scans of the humans show a species that has barely achieved faster-than-light travel. They fight among themselves constantly, pollute their own planet, and their technology is primitive by our standards. Why should the combined might of the Galactic Council fear such backwards creatures?" His form dimmed slightly, a sign of deep concern among his people. "Honored Speaker, I understand your skepticism. 6 months ago, the High Command shared your assessment. We viewed humans as nothing more than another primitive species ripe for conquest and integration into our empire. We were catastrophically wrong." The chamber grew quieter. The Empire was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most efficient and ruthless military forces. Their crystal ships could slice through asteroid fields, their energy weapons could crack moons, and their tactical precision was legendary. For them to admit failure was almost unthinkable. "Please continue," Speaker prompted, his ancient voice carrying the weight of. His form brightened as he accessed his memory cores. The operation was designated as a simple pacification mission. Intelligence reported that humans had achieved basic space travel, but possessed no unified planetary government, no energy shields, and no weapons capable of threatening our vessels. Fleet Commander Ra was assigned 3 battle cruisers and supporting vessels, more than sufficient force to subdue any resistance and claim the Sol system for the Empire. The holographic display in the center of the chamber activated, showing the sleek, angular forms of warships. Their crystalline hulls gleamed with deadly beauty, weapon ports glowing with contained energy. The assembled delegates had seen these ships reduce entire civilizations to submission. "The initial approach proceeded exactly as planned," continued. "Our fleet entered the Sol system with overwhelming superiority. We detected their primitive satellites and space stations, their small chemical fuel rockets, their basic radio communications. Commander Ra sent the standard surrender demand, expecting immediate compliance as we had received from hundreds of species before." The display shifted to show Earth as they had first seen it. A blue-green marble spinning in space, dotted with lights on the night side, swirled with white clouds. It looked peaceful, even beautiful. The human response was unexpected, admitted. Instead of surrender, they sent a single transmission across all frequencies. The message was brief. "This is Admiral Sarah of Earth Defense Command. You have entered human space with hostile intent. Leave immediately or face the consequences." Several delegates made sounds of amusement. The idea of such a primitive species threatening the mighty seemed absurd. Commander Ra was equally amused, said, his tone growing darker. "She decided to demonstrate our superiority by destroying one of their larger space installations, a structure they called the International Space Station. A single precision beam was fired, completely vaporizing the target. The message was clear: surrender or watch your civilization burn." The hologram showed the brief flash of destruction, then empty space where the station had been. Again, the humans surprised us. Instead of the expected panic and immediate capitulation, their response was different. Admiral's voice came through the communicators again, but this time there was something in her tone that gave even our hardened commander pause. "You just killed 47 people. Scientists, engineers, researchers, people with families, people with dreams. You've made this personal." Paused, his crystalline form flickering with what his species displayed as distress. What happened next all our understanding of warfare and tactics? Instead of massing their primitive spacecraft in a hopeless frontal assault, the humans did something no species in recorded galactic history had ever attempted. They attacked us with their entire planet. The silence in the chamber was now absolute. Even the constant background hum of life support systems seemed muted. Within 6 hours of our attack on their station, every major population center on Earth had gone dark. Not destroyed, dark. They had shut down all non-essential systems, redirecting every available power source to what they called defense grid activation. We learned later that in those 6 hours, the humans had converted their entire industrial capacity from civilian production to military manufacturing. The holographic display showed Earth again, but this time the night side was almost completely black except for specific points of brilliant light. But that was not the most disturbing development, continued. Our sensors detected massive electromagnetic signatures emanating from their planet, hundreds of them growing stronger by the hour. Commander Ra ordered a full sensor sweep, expecting to find some hidden weapons platform or defense network we had missed. The ambassador's form pulsed with remembered shock. What we found instead were humans, hundreds of millions of humans, all working with a coordination that would have impressed a hive mind species. They had converted their civilian infrastructure into weapon production facilities. Their automobile factories were producing military vehicles. Their electronics manufacturers were building guidance systems. Their agricultural processing plants were creating ration supplies. In less than a day, an entire planet had transformed from a civilian population into a unified war machine. The assembled delegates began to shift uncomfortably. The implications of such rapid mobilization were staggering. Commander Ra decided to end this before it could develop further. She ordered a focused bombardment of their major population centers, expecting to break their will through demonstration of superior firepower. Our weapons struck their cities, their industrial areas, their military installations. The display showed beams of energy lancing down from the ships, explosions blooming across the planet's surface. The humans died, said quietly. They died in the thousands, then tens of thousands. Their primitive structures offered no protection against our advanced weapons. But something incomprehensible happened with each casualty. Instead of weakening human resolve, every death seemed to strengthen it. The ambassador activated another section of the hologram, showing communication intercepts from Earth during the bombardment. These are actual transmissions we recorded from their communication networks during the attack. Listen carefully. The chamber filled with human voices, speaking in dozens of different languages, but all translated into galactic standard. Shanghai Industrial District to Global Command, we've taken heavy casualties, but production is still online. Weapons shipments will continue on schedule. This is Moscow Defense Coordination. The city is burning, but our factories are underground now. We're not stopping. London calling all stations. We've lost the surface facilities, but secondary production sites are operational. We're still in this fight. Tokyo reporting. They hit us hard, but we're redirecting through the subway manufacturing network. Humanity doesn't quit. As the voices faded, continued. For every human killed, 10 more seemed to take their place. For every facility destroyed, 3 more appeared underground, in mountains, beneath oceans. They had somehow anticipated our tactics and prepared contingencies we never imagined possible. The Hive Collective representative spoke for the first time, her translated voice carrying confusion. Ambassador, this description suggests impossible coordination. No species achieves such unity without a biological hive-mind connection. How did they accomplish this level of organization? His form brightened with what his people showed as grim admiration. That is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of human nature, honored delegate. They accomplished this coordination not through biological compulsion, but through something they call free will. Each human chose to participate, chose to fight, chose to sacrifice for their species' survival. The gaseous beings from the Nebula Confederacy pulsed with colors indicating deep concern. Their representative's voice whispered through the chamber. Chosen unity is far more dangerous than compelled unity. Compulsion can be broken, redirected, or corrupted, but choice creates true commitment. Precisely, agreed. And that commitment manifested in ways that challenged every assumption we held about warfare and technology. While our advanced weapons destroyed their surface infrastructure, the humans had already moved their critical operations underground. But more than that, they began adapting our own technology against us. The hologram shifted to show wreckage from space, twisted metal and crystal debris floating against the star field. These are the remains of the destroyer Crystal Dawn. It was destroyed not by human spacecraft, but by what they called improvised weapons. They had taken the debris from our previous attacks, analyzed our technology, and somehow created crude but effective weapons using their own industrial base combined with our advanced materials. Several delegates made sounds of disbelief. The idea of a primitive species reverse-engineering advanced technology in the middle of a battle seemed impossible. The destruction of Crystal Dawn taught us that human adaptability was beyond our comprehension, continued. But what followed taught us that human determination was beyond our capacity to break. The ambassador paused, his crystalline form dimming as he accessed particularly disturbing memories. Commander Ra realized that conventional bombardment was ineffective. The humans were too adaptable, too resilient, too willing to accept casualties in exchange for continued resistance. She made the decision to deploy our most devastating weapon, the Planet Cracker beam. A focused energy lance capable of splitting a world's crust and rendering it uninhabitable. The chamber erupted in shocked sounds and movements. Planet cracking was considered an ultimate weapon, used only in the most extreme circumstances. The environmental and resource destruction it caused made it almost as costly to the attacker as the defender. The weapon charged for 6 hours, said over the noise. During that time, we detected increased activity from the planet below. We assumed the humans were preparing for evacuation or attempting some desperate final assault. The holographic display showed the massive flagship, energy building along its length as the Planet Cracker weapon prepared to fire. What we observed instead was the most psychologically disturbing behavior in recorded galactic history. The humans were not evacuating. They were not attacking. They were preparing to die, but not in panic or despair. They were preparing to die with purpose. The ambassador's voice grew quieter, but somehow more intense. We intercepted millions of personal communications during those 6 hours. Parents recording final messages for children, spouses saying goodbye, scientists transmitting research data to hidden archives, artists creating final works, military personnel recording tactical observations for future human generations that might survive on distant worlds. The silence in the chamber was now oppressive. The implications of an entire species preparing for extinction while maintaining purpose and hope was beyond most delegates' understanding. But the most disturbing communication was a planetary broadcast from Admiral. She spoke for 23 minutes and 17 seconds. I have her words memorized, as they have become required study for all military personnel. Activated another holographic display, showing the image of a human female in military uniform. Her face bore the marks of exhaustion and stress, but her eyes held something that made even the Crystal Ambassador uncomfortable. She began with these words, "To any human survivors who may find this record and to any alien intelligence who may study our species after today, understand this. We are about to die, but we are not about to surrender. Earth may fall, but the idea of humanity will survive. We have hidden archives throughout this solar system and beyond. Our children on the colony ships will remember, and someday, somehow, they will return." The human admiral's recorded voice filled the chamber, speaking in English but translated for all present. "You came to our world expecting easy conquest. You found resistance. You brought greater weapons, and we adapted. You brought overwhelming force, and we endured. Now you bring extinction, and we accept it, but we do not submit to it. Every human who dies today dies free. Every child in our hidden colonies will be born free, and every human who ever encounters your kind will know that we chose death over slavery." The recording paused and continued. Admiral then did something that convinced Commander Ra that humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. She surrendered. Confused sounds filled the chamber. The logic seemed contradictory. But her surrender was not submission, the ambassador clarified. She offered a deal. The humans would cease all resistance and allow themselves to be exterminated without further damage to forces, in exchange for forces leaving the Sol system permanently and never returning. They would accept total annihilation to protect their hidden colonies and ensure their species' future. The crystalline being's form flickered with remembered shock. No species in galactic history has ever offered extinction as a bargaining chip. The psychological implications were beyond our understanding. Commander Ra found herself negotiating with a species that was willing to trade their entire for the possibility that their descendants might someday be free. Council speaker leaned forward, his ancient voice heavy with concern. "Ambassador, I begin to understand your warning. Please continue." "The planet Cracker fired," said simply, "but it never reached Earth. The energy beam that should have split Earth's crust struck something impossible, a field of pure defiance that shouldn't have existed according to any known laws of physics. The planet Cracker, capable of destroying worlds, simply stopped. Not absorbed, not deflected, stopped, as if the beam had encountered something more fundamental than matter or energy. Our instruments detected no shield generators, no energy fields, no technological barrier of any kind," continued, his crystalline form pulsing with remembered confusion. "Yet our most powerful weapon was rendered completely ineffective. Commander Ra ordered full sensor sweeps, energy spectrum analysis, dimensional scanning, everything our advanced science could provide. The holographic display showed the ships frantically scanning Earth with every sensor at their disposal. Energy readings spiking across multiple spectrums, but revealing nothing that could explain what they had witnessed. What we discovered every scientific principle in our databases," the ambassador said quietly. "The barrier wasn't technological, it wasn't biological, it wasn't even physical in any way we could measure. According to our science teams, it was conceptual." Several delegates made sounds of confusion. The gaseous beings from the Nebula Confederacy flickered through colors indicating deep perplexity. The Hive Collective representative clicked her mandibles in patterns, suggesting their group mind was struggling to process this information. "Conceptual?" Council speaker inquired, his ancient voice carrying genuine puzzlement. "The humans had somehow weaponized the concept of refusal itself," explained. "Their species' collective rejection of submission had become a tangible force. They didn't just refuse to surrender, they refused to allow the universe to let them be destroyed. Our science teams theorized that human consciousness, when unified in purpose, could affect reality at a quantum level." The precursor representative's massive form shifted with what his species displayed as deep thought. "Ambassador, what you describe sounds less like science and more like mythology." "That's what Commander Ra believed initially," agreed. "She ordered the weapon to charge again, convinced that the first failure was due to some technical malfunction. But while our crew prepared for a second Planet Cracker strike, the humans did something even more impossible than their first defense." The holographic display shifted to show space around Earth, specifically focusing on what had been empty vacuum moments before. "They attacked us with their dead." The chamber fell into complete silence. Even the life support systems seemed to hold their breath. "I know how that sounds," continued. "But I can only report what our sensors detected and what our crew witnessed. The humans who had been killed in our bombardment, they began appearing in space around our ships. Not as physical beings, but as something our instruments could detect and our weapons could not affect." The display showed ghostly human figures floating in the void, moving with purpose despite having no means of propulsion or survival in vacuum. "Our energy weapons passed through them harmlessly. Our physical projectiles struck nothing, but they could affect us. They passed through our hulls as if our crystalline armor were empty air, and wherever they went, our systems began to fail." The Hive Collective representative spoke with obvious distress. "Ambassador, what you describe is impossible. Death is a biological function. Deceased organic matter cannot maintain consciousness or take purposeful action." "I would have agreed with you," replied. "But human consciousness apparently operates by different rules than any species we've encountered. Our science teams documented thousands of these manifestations moving through our fleet. They didn't attack our crew directly, but they systematically disabled every weapon system, every engine, every critical component needed for warfare." The hologram showed crew members in their crystal-walled corridors, their forms flickering with confusion and fear as ghostly human figures moved past them, unaffected by the aliens' attempts to communicate or interfere. The most disturbing aspect was their apparent intelligence and coordination, the ambassador continued. These were not mindless apparitions or random energy phenomena. They worked together with the same tactical precision we had observed in living humans, but with capabilities that exceeded any biological limitation. Council Speaker's ancient voice carried a note of deep concern. Ambassador, are you suggesting that human consciousness survives biological death and can continue to take meaningful action? I'm suggesting that human consciousness rejects any limitation imposed upon it, including death, replied. While our fleet was being systematically disabled by their deceased, the living humans on the planet below continued their resistance activities. But now they were being directed by tactical advisors who had no physical form and could observe our operations without being detected. The crystalline being's form dimmed with remembered horror. It was at this point that Commander Ra made the decision that saved our fleet and possibly our entire empire. She opened communications with Admiral and formally requested terms for withdrawal from the Sol system. Shocked sounds filled the chamber. The idea of the mighty empire requesting terms from a primitive species was almost incomprehensible. Admiral's response was immediate and non-negotiable, continued. Complete withdrawal of all forces from human space. Formal recognition of human sovereignty over any territory they chose to claim, and a binding agreement that the Empire would never again attempt to conquer or subjugate the human species. The ambassador paused, his form flickering with what his people showed as deep humiliation. Commander Ra agreed to all terms without negotiation. The delegates from Hive Collective Prime clicked their mandibles in patterns indicating profound shock. The rock people of Granite Prime shifted their massive forms in movements that suggested their usually stoic nature had been deeply disturbed. But the humans were not finished with their demonstration, continued. As our fleet prepared to withdraw, Admiral transmitted one final message. She wanted to ensure that we understood exactly what had happened and why. The holographic display activated again, showing Admiral's face. But this time, something had changed. Her expression held a mixture of sadness and determination that seemed to look directly into the souls of everyone watching. She said, "You came here believing that superior technology and overwhelming force would guarantee your victory. You learned that humans adapt, that we endure, that we refuse to surrender even when faced with extinction. But there's something else about our species that you need to understand before you leave." The recorded human's voice filled the chamber again. "We remember. Every human who died today will be remembered by name. Every act of sacrifice will become part of our cultural history. Every tactical lesson learned from this conflict will be taught to our children and our children's children. You didn't just attack a planet, you attacked the collective memory and determination of our entire species." Admiral's image leaned forward, her eyes seeming to focus directly on the alien viewers. "More importantly, we forgive. We understand that you attacked us because you believed we were weak, because you thought conquest was your right, because your culture has convinced you that might makes right. But humans have a concept you may not understand: mercy. Despite everything you've done, despite everyone you've killed, we're letting you leave. Not because we can't destroy you, but because we choose not to." The recording paused for a moment, and then Admiral delivered words that made crystalline form flicker with remembered terror. "But understand this clearly. This mercy is a one-time offer. You attacked us once and we defended ourselves. If you or any other species attacks humanity again, we won't just defend ourselves. We'll hunt you. We'll find every world you control, every ship in your fleet, every member of your species wherever they might hide. And we won't stop until every threat to human freedom has been permanently eliminated." The chamber had become so quiet that individual delegates could hear their own biological functions operating. "Not because we hate you," Admiral's voice continued, "but because we love our children more than we fear death, more than we fear pain, more than we fear the vast emptiness of space itself. Human parents will do anything to ensure their children grow up free." The recording ended and allowed the implications to settle over the assembled delegates before continuing. As our fleet from the Sol system, our sensors detected something that confirmed Admiral's warning wasn't empty rhetoric. The humans had begun construction projects throughout their star system on a scale that their apparent technological limitations. The holographic display showed long-range sensor readings of the Sol system taken during the withdrawal. Massive construction efforts were visible around every major celestial body. In less than a week, they had begun converting asteroids into fortresses, moons into weapons platforms, and their gas giants into resource extraction facilities. But more disturbing was what our deep space sensors detected over the following months. The display shifted to show trajectory plots spreading out from Earth like a vast web. Hundreds of small ships, launched in every direction. Not colony vessels or exploration craft, but something our intelligence services eventually identified as seed ships. Each one carried a small crew of humans, advanced manufacturing equipment, and most importantly, complete records of human culture, science, and military doctrine. The Nebula Confederacy representative pulsed with colors indicating growing alarm. Ambassador, are you suggesting they were establishing hidden colonies throughout the galaxy? Not just colonies, corrected. Backup civilizations. Each seed ship was designed to establish a completely independent human society capable of rebuilding their species from nothing if Earth were ever truly destroyed. But these weren't desperate survivors fleeing a dying world. These were deliberate expansions of human civilization, each one tasked with ensuring that humanity would survive and eventually thrive regardless of what threats they might face. The ambassador's form brightened with what his species showed as reluctant admiration. Our intelligence services tracked these ships for months, trying to predict where they might establish colonies. What we discovered was perhaps the most strategically sophisticated expansion plan in galactic history. The humans hadn't just launched ships randomly. They had studied our stellar cartography, analyzed trade routes, identified resource-rich systems, and mapped the territories of every known spacefaring species. Council speaker leaned forward, his ancient voice heavy with growing concern. Ambassador, please be specific. What exactly did your tracking reveal? The humans had planned their expansion to maximize their survival chances while minimizing the risk of detection or interference from existing galactic powers, replied. Each seed ship was targeted toward systems that were strategically valuable but currently unclaimed or only lightly settled. They were establishing human presence throughout the galaxy in such a way that it would be almost impossible to eliminate them completely. The crystalline being's form pulsed with remembered anxiety. But the most disturbing discovery came 6 months after the failed invasion. Our deep space monitoring stations detected signals that appeared to be human in origin, but they were coming from locations where no seed ships had been detected. The holographic display showed a galactic map with points of light scattered throughout the spiral arms, far more than could be accounted for by the tracked seed ships. At first, our analysts believed the signals were echoes or artifacts of some unknown communication technology. But careful study revealed something impossible. The humans were already established in star systems that our tracking showed their seed ships could not yet have reached. The chamber filled with confused sounds and movements as delegates tried to process this information. How is such a thing possible? The Hive Collective representative inquired, her translated voice carrying the confusion of millions of linked minds. Our science teams developed 3 possible explanations, replied, his form dimming with remembered dread. The first was that human technology was far more advanced than we had realized, and they possessed faster-than-light travel capabilities that exceeded our own. The ambassador paused before continuing. The second possibility was that the humans had somehow developed time manipulation technology, allowing their seed ships to arrive at destinations before they had actually departed. Another pause, longer this time. The third possibility was the one that kept our strategists awake for months. The humans had been expanding throughout the galaxy long before our invasion. The attack on Earth hadn't revealed a primitive species ready for conquest. It had revealed an established galactic power that had been deliberately concealing its true extent and capabilities. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several delegates made sounds of alarm, while others began rapid communication with their home governments. Which explanation proved correct? Council speaker asked, though his tone suggested he dreaded the answer. His crystalline form flickered through several color patterns, before settling on the deep blue that his species displayed when conveying information of ultimate importance. All 3. The revelation that all 3 explanations were correct sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. The chamber erupted in panicked communications as representatives began transmitting urgent warnings to their respective governments. The Hive Collective's unified clicking reached a crescendo that made their translator systems strain to keep up. The gaseous beings from the Nebula Confederacy pulsed through color spectrums indicating extreme alarm. "Order, order in the chamber," Council Speaker's ancient voice boomed over the chaos, his massive precursor form radiating authority that had maintained galactic peace for. "Ambassador, explain how all three possibilities could be simultaneously true." The crystalline ambassador waited for the noise to subside before continuing, his form now cycling through the deep blues and purples that his species used to convey information of existential importance. "Our intelligence services required 8 months of investigation to piece together the full scope of what we had encountered," began. "The humans possessed technological capabilities far beyond what their apparent development level suggested, but they had been deliberately concealing these advances behind a facade of primitive civilization." The holographic display activated, showing a cross-section view of Earth that revealed the planet's true complexity. What we had observed during our invasion was essentially a carefully maintained theatrical performance. The primitive structures on Earth's surface, the basic space technology, the chemical rockets, all of it was real, but it represented only the most visible layer of human civilization. The display zoomed deeper, revealing vast underground complexes, underwater cities, and orbital installations that had been cloaked from sensors. The real human civilization exists in layers. The surface layer maintains the appearance of a developing spacefaring species for the benefit of any alien observers. The second layer, hidden beneath oceans and underground, contains industrial and research facilities that rival anything in our empire. The third layer, concealed in pocket dimensions and folded space, houses technology that our science teams are still attempting to understand. Several delegates made sounds of disbelief. The idea of a species maintaining such an elaborate deception for the benefit of alien observation seemed impossible. "But why?" the Granite Prime representative asked, her massive rocky form shifting with confusion. "What purpose could such deception serve?" "Strategic advantage," replied simply. "Human military doctrine includes something they call strategic misdirection. They allow potential enemies to underestimate their capabilities while they assess threats and prepare appropriate responses." The ambassador's form brightened as he accessed more detailed memory files. "Our investigation revealed that humans had been aware of our empire for over 50 years before our invasion. They had been monitoring our communications, studying our technology, and analyzing our military tactics through methods our security services still cannot fully comprehend." The holographic display showed intercepts of communications dating back decades, all apparently collected and analyzed by human intelligence operations. "They knew we were coming. They knew when we would arrive. They knew what weapons we would use and what tactics we would employ. The resistance we encountered wasn't desperate improvisation. It was a carefully orchestrated defensive strategy designed to test our capabilities while revealing their own in graduated stages." The chamber fell silent as the full implications of this revelation settled over the delegates. They had assumed they were hearing about a spontaneous defense against unexpected invasion. Instead, they were learning about a comprehensive intelligence operation that had lasted decades. "The conversion of their industrial capacity during the invasion wasn't emergency adaptation," continued. "It was the activation of prepositioned manufacturing systems designed specifically for rapid military production. The coordination between human population centers wasn't spontaneous unity. It was the implementation of long-established contingency plans." Council Speaker voice carried a note of growing alarm. "Ambassador, are you suggesting that this entire scenario was planned by the humans from the beginning?" "Not planned," corrected. "Prepared for. Human strategic planning operates on timescales that we found difficult to comprehend. They don't just prepare for likely threats. They prepare for every possible threat they can imagine, including threats that may not emerge for centuries." The crystalline being's form pulsed with what his species displayed, as reluctant admiration mixed with deep concern. "Our analysis of human strategic documents, obtained through various means, revealed that they had developed contingency plans for invasion by over 300 different potential alien species, including several that matched the characteristics of civilizations in this chamber." Uncomfortable movements rippled through the assembled delegates as they realized the implications of this statement. But the most disturbing discovery concerned their time manipulation capabilities, continued. Human scientists had achieved limited temporal manipulation technology approximately 100 years ago. They have been using it not for conquest or expansion, but for strategic preparation. The holographic display showed complex mathematical equations and temporal mechanics diagrams that made several delegates' translation systems struggle to find appropriate conceptual frameworks. They send information backwards through time, not physical objects or people, but data. Intelligence about future events, technological specifications for advanced equipment, strategic warnings about potential threats. This allows their past selves to prepare for challenges that haven't yet occurred. The gaseous beings from the Nebula Confederacy pulsed through colors, indicating profound philosophical distress. Their representative's voice whispered through the chamber. Such manipulation of causality creates paradoxes that should make it impossible. Human consciousness apparently operates outside normal causality constraints, replied. Their minds can process and act upon information that technically doesn't exist yet in their timeline. This gives them an almost supernatural ability to anticipate and prepare for future challenges. The ambassador paused, allowing the implications to settle before delivering the most disturbing revelation. This explains how human colonies were detected in star systems their seed ships couldn't have reached. They had been establishing these colonies for decades, using temporal intelligence to identify the optimal locations and timing for expansion. The chamber erupted again in alarmed communications. The idea of a species that could effectively see and act upon future events was beyond most delegates' ability to process. Order, order, speaker commanded again. Ambassador, please continue with your report. His form shifted to the deepest blue in his species' emotional spectrum, the color reserved for information that could determine the survival of civilizations. The third aspect of our discovery concerned the true extent of human expansion throughout the galaxy. Our investigation revealed that what we believed was the emergence of a new spacefaring species was actually the revelation of an established galactic power that had been operating in secret for over 2 centuries. The holographic display expanded to show a full galactic map, with points of confirmed human presence scattered throughout every major sector. Humans have been exploring and colonizing the galaxy since they achieved faster-than-light travel. But instead of announcing their presence and seeking contact with established civilizations, they chose to study us from hiding. Every major spacefaring species in this chamber has been under human observation for decades. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a series of physical blows. The idea that a supposedly primitive species had been secretly studying and evaluating their civilizations challenged every assumption about galactic political structure. They have been learning our languages, studying our cultures, analyzing our military capabilities, and mapping our territories while remaining completely undetected, continued. The facade of primitive development on Earth was maintained specifically to avoid attracting attention while their hidden colonies established themselves throughout the galaxy. The Hive Collective representative spoke with obvious distress. Ambassador, this suggests a level of strategic sophistication that exceeds any known species. How could they maintain such extensive operations while avoiding detection by our combined intelligence services? Human stealth technology operates on principles that our science teams are still attempting to understand, replied. They don't just hide their ships and installations from sensors, they hide them from reality itself. Their advanced colonies exist in what they call parallel dimensional pockets, spaces that occupy the same coordinates as normal space, but remain completely invisible and inaccessible unless you know the specific access methods. The crystalline ambassador's form flickered through rapid color changes as he accessed particularly complex memory files. During our investigation, we discovered that some human colonies have been established inside the territories of other galactic civilizations, without those civilizations ever becoming aware of their presence. They have been living alongside other species, studying them, sometimes for generations, while remaining completely undetected. Council speaker leaned forward, his massive form radiating the deep concern that came with experience in galactic politics. Ambassador, are you suggesting that humans may be present in our own territories without our knowledge? I'm not suggesting it, replied quietly. I'm confirming it. Human observation posts exist within the space controlled by every civilization represented in this chamber. The chamber fell into absolute silence. The implications were staggering. Every delegate was suddenly aware that their most sensitive military and political activities might have been under observation by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Our security services conducted exhaustive searches of our own territory following this discovery, the ambassador continued. We found 17 human installations within space, some of which had been operational for over 40 years. These weren't military bases or invasion staging areas. They were research stations focused on studying our culture, technology, and social development. The holographic display showed images of these hidden installations, sophisticated facilities that somehow existed without disrupting local space or alerting any monitoring systems. The humans had been learning everything about us while we remained completely ignorant of their true nature. They knew our military capabilities, our strategic weaknesses, our political structures, our cultural values. When they chose to reveal themselves during our invasion, they possessed more information about the Empire than our own intelligence services had compiled. The ambassador's form dimmed with remembered humiliation. But the most disturbing aspect of these hidden colonies wasn't their strategic intelligence value, it was their apparent purpose. The humans weren't preparing to attack or conquer anyone. They were preparing to defend themselves against threats that might not emerge for centuries. Activated another section of the holographic display, showing what appeared to be massive defensive installations positioned throughout the galaxy. Every human colony, whether hidden or revealed, is positioned to provide strategic coverage against potential threats to their core territories. They have created a defensive network that spans the entire galaxy, designed to detect and respond to any possible threat to their species' survival. The crystalline being's form brightened as he delivered the most crucial part of his warning. The humans aren't expansionist conquerors seeking to dominate the galaxy. They are defensive perfectionists seeking to ensure that no power in the universe can ever threaten their freedom or the freedom of those they choose to protect. They have spent centuries building a civilization specifically designed to survive and resist any conceivable form of oppression or conquest. Council Speaker's ancient voice carried the weight of galactic authority. Ambassador, please be specific about the nature of your warning to this council. His crystalline form blazed with the full intensity of his species' most urgent communication mode. Honorable Council members, the human species represents the most formidable defensive force in galactic history. They cannot be conquered, cannot be intimidated, and cannot be destroyed. Any attempt to attack humanity will result in retaliation of a scope and intensity that could potentially eliminate entire civilizations. The ambassador paused, letting his words settle before delivering the final warning that had brought him before the Galactic Council. But more importantly, humanity has made it clear that they consider the freedom of all species to be worth defending. Any civilization that attempts to conquer or oppress others may find itself facing not just human resistance, but active human intervention on behalf of their victims. The chamber erupted in shocked communications as delegates realized that the balance of galactic power had shifted permanently. The humans weren't just another species to be and managed. They were a force that could reshape the entire structure of galactic civilization. They bleed, concluded, his voice carrying across the chaos, but they never surrender. And now that they have revealed themselves, they will never allow surrender to be forced upon any species that chooses freedom. The crystalline ambassador's final words echoed through the chamber as delegates frantically began preparing emergency communications to their home governments, all suddenly aware that the galaxy had changed forever. They had nowhere to go until Earth took them in. The massive refugee ships drifted through the void like broken dreams, their hulls by plasma burns and meteor impacts. Captain H pressed her four-fingered hand against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the blue-green marble that humans called Earth grow larger in the distance. Behind her, the low murmur of her crew mixed with the worried chittering of the refugees and the deep, rumbling conversations of the families who had lost everything. 3 months ago, the Empire had swept through the outer rim territories like a plague of locusts. H had watched from her command deck as entire star systems burned. They had been the first to fall, its crystalline cities reduced to glowing slag in mere hours. The proud mining colonies had lasted slightly longer, but their defensive fleets were no match for dreadnoughts that could crack planets in half. Now, 47 different alien species crowded into the hastily converted cargo ships that made up their ragtag convoy. They were the lucky ones, the survivors who had managed to escape before the death machines arrived. But luck only went so far in the cold emptiness of space, and their supplies were running dangerously low. "Captain," came the synthesized voice of her communications officer, a named whose translator implant gave his words a tinny quality. "The human vessels are responding to our distress beacon." H turned from the observation window, her tail swishing nervously behind her. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Most established civilizations viewed them as primitive upstarts, barely worth acknowledging. The Galactic Council had granted them membership more out of amusement than respect. "What's their response?" H asked, though she already feared the answer. Every other system they had approached had turned them away. The Republic claimed they lacked the resources. The Federation cited security concerns. Even the peaceful assembly of rings had closed their borders, claiming the refugee crisis was not their responsibility. Crystalline features shifted in what might have been confusion. They're asking about our immediate needs, Captain. Medical supplies, food, shelter capacity. They want to know how many children we have aboard." An engineer named, whose massive frame made the bridge feel cramped, let out a skeptical grunt. "Probably sizing us up to see what they can salvage from our ships. Humans are known traitors, after all." But something in's tone made H pause. What else did they say? "They're dispatching emergency supply vessels immediately. No questions about payment or political status. They just said they're coming to help." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems. H had been a captain for over 20 years, had dealt with dozens of species across hundreds of systems, and she knew the usual diplomatic dance. First came the negotiations, the careful questioning about resources and trade agreements, the subtle threats and promises. But the humans had simply asked what they needed and promised to bring it. 3 hours later, the first human ships appeared on their sensors. H expected military vessels, maybe a trade convoy with armed escorts. Instead, she found herself staring at what appeared to be converted civilian craft. Hospital ships with Red Cross symbols painted on their hulls. Massive cargo haulers that looked like they had been hastily retrofitted. Even what appeared to be luxury cruise liners, their vacation destinations replaced with refugee processing equipment. "Captain H," came a new voice over the communication system, warm and distinctly human. "This is Admiral Sarah of the Terran Relief Fleet. We're here to escort you to Earth. Our medical teams are standing by to transfer any critical patients, and we have food and water for immediate distribution." H felt something she hadn't experienced in months, hope, but years of dealing with galactic politics had taught her caution. "Admiral, we appreciate your offer, but we must be clear about our situation. We are refugees with no resources to offer in trade. We cannot pay for your assistance." There was a pause, then what sounded suspiciously like laughter. "Captain, the only payment we want is the chance to help. Now let's get your people fed and figure out where everyone's going to sleep." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Human medical teams boarded the refugee ships with equipment H had never seen before. They didn't just treat the obviously sick and injured. They performed full medical scans on everyone, paying special attention to the children. The humans seemed particularly concerned about something they called trauma counseling, a concept that didn't translate well into most alien languages. Dr. James, a human physician who had taken charge of the medical operations on H's ship, explained it while treating a young who had witnessed the destruction of her home city. "Physical wounds heal," he said, his hands gentle as he worked. "But the mind needs healing too, especially after something like this." H watched as he spoke softly to the child in her own language, though his accent was terrible. The translator implant helped, but the fact that he was even trying seemed to calm the young in a way that medical scanners couldn't. "Where did you learn?" H asked. Doctor smiled tiredly. "Started studying it as soon as we got word about the refugee situation 3 days ago. Most of our relief teams have been cramming alien languages and cultural protocols. We figured if we're going to help, we should at least try to communicate properly." 3 days? They had known about the refugee crisis for 3 days and had already mobilized this massive relief effort. H had seen galactic civilizations take months to decide on simple trade agreements. As they approached Earth's solar system, H found herself called to the observation deck again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Word had spread through all the refugee ships about what they were seeing, and representatives from every species had gathered to witness it. The outer system was bustling with activity. Massive space stations that hadn't existed in any galactic database were under rapid construction. Supply ships moved in constant streams between Earth, its moon, and the larger space stations. But what caught everyone's attention were the new settlements being built on previously uninhabited moons and asteroids. "Are those," began, his voice trailing off. "Refugee colonies," Admiral confirmed over the communication system. She had been updating them regularly as they traveled, another breach of normal protocol that had everyone on edge. "We started construction as soon as we received the first reports of expansion. We figured it was only a matter of time before displaced populations would need somewhere safe to rebuild." A small child pressed her face against the observation window, her large eyes reflecting the lights of the construction sites. "Are those for us?" she asked in her musical language. H knelt down beside her, struggling to find the words. In all her years of space travel, she had never encountered anything like this. Civilizations simply didn't prepare for other species' problems. They didn't mobilize their entire economy to help refugees they had never met. "I think they might be," H said softly. As Earth grew larger in their viewports, more details became visible. The planet's orbital space was crowded with stations, but these weren't military installations or trade depots. They were processing centers, medical facilities, and temporary housing. Streams of human ships moved between them, carrying supplies and personnel. "Captain," said, his voice filled with something that might have been wonder, "I'm reading massive agricultural installations on the planet's surface. New ones still under construction, and the energy readings. They've converted a significant portion of their industrial capacity to refugee support operations." H felt her chest tighten. The scope of what the humans were doing was almost incomprehensible. They weren't just offering temporary shelter or basic supplies. They were rebuilding their entire civilization's infrastructure to accommodate species they barely knew. Admiral's voice crackled over the communication system again. "All right, folks, we're going to start the processing procedure. Each family group will be assigned a liaison officer to help with immediate needs and long-term planning. We have interpreters standing by for 43 different languages, and we're working on the other 4. As their convoy settled into orbit around Earth, H noticed something that made her breath catch. The planet's surface was lit not just by cities, but by massive construction projects spanning entire continents. When she enhanced the visual feed, she could see that humans were literally reshaping their world to make room for the refugees. "Why?" she whispered, not realizing she had spoken aloud until Doctor, who was finishing up his medical rounds, heard her. He paused in his work, considering the question seriously. "My grandmother was a refugee," he said finally. "Her family fled Earth during one of our old wars, ended up on a colony world where nobody wanted them. She used to tell me stories about how hard it was, how alone they felt." He gestured toward the planet below them. "I guess we figure nobody should have to feel that way if we can help it." It was such a simple answer, but it explained everything and nothing all at once. H had studied human psychology as part of her diplomatic training, but this level of compassion for complete strangers, everything she thought she knew about how civilizations operated. A young human officer appeared on the bridge, moving with the quick efficiency that seemed to characterize all the relief workers. "Captain H, I'm Lieutenant Park, your assigned liaison. If you're ready, we'd like to begin transport down to the surface. We have temporary housing set up, and we'd like to get everyone settled before the dinner rush." "Dinner rush," rumbled, his translation implant struggling with the casual phrase. Lieutenant Park grinned. "We've got cooking teams from every major human culture preparing traditional foods, plus teams working on approximating the dietary needs for all the refugee species. Tonight's menu includes crystal fruit and synthesized mineral supplements. We're still working on getting the textures right, but the nutrition values should be spot on." H realized her mouth was hanging open. They had been preparing food for species whose dietary requirements most humans had probably never heard of until a few days ago. As the transport ships prepared to take the first groups down to Earth's surface, H found herself at the observation deck one final time. The blue marble that had seemed so foreign and distant now felt like something else entirely. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had finally found somewhere they could call home.